Good evening. Have all of you seen the viral WhatsApp forward that said the new definition of EBITDA? Earnings before Iran war and Donald Trump announcements. This is fundamentally what I felt today's discussion is about, how to deal with problems that are really not of our making. To discuss this, we have a panel of some of our most eminent and experienced business leaders who have an excellent track record in leading their companies through periods of uncertainty and adversity. Every crisis is also an opportunity. Therefore, while all of our media is full of details of the crisis, I'm hoping that in today's discussion, we can also focus a little bit on what opportunities the end of the crisis might also offer us. Uday, let me come to you first. We have supply disruptions, we have a declining rupee, and the threat of inflation on the horizon. What would you say are the top challenges India should watch out for if the situation in West Asia, say, persists for more than another month?
Sujit, first of all, thank you and delighted to be here. You know, you have to divide the strategy into two parts. It's a little bit like a person with a heart challenge. The right thing for a person with a heart challenge is long walks. But when you have a heart attack, you do a massage. Therefore, your question is 30 days. If this war remains for more than 30 days, I think we'll have a time which is what I would call as a heart massage. And India has the playbook. It goes back to 1998 when Dr. Bimal Jalan was the RBI governor. And then, of course, in 2013 when India was one of the fragile five. So the playbook is pretty clear. You first make sure that you stop all the foreign exchange excesses in speculation, which the RBI has already done. And the next step thereafter, if this really becomes a crisis and say oil goes to 120, 130 and remains there for more than a month, the next part of the playbook, if you go by history, has been interest rates. And that's something which we have to be ready for. And thereafter, of course, is more subtle measures, including India in the past has raised money from overseas Indians as NRI deposits. And I have a really interesting definition from an Indian point of view of NRI deposits. We define NRIs as non-resident Indians. But at times they become not required Indians. And there are other times where they become now required Indians. So we always have that window as well open. So I think really depends if it's a long haul, problematic crisis. Countries to the east of the Middle East have the biggest challenge.
Arundhati, let me come to you now. You now lead a business that's at the forefront of enterprise AI. Lot of conversations about generative AI and the disruption it could cause to India's IT services sector, which has been a tremendous employment generator and quite a pillar of the prosperity among Indian middle class over the last couple of decades. How should India prepare for this disruption?
Well, the one thing that I can tell you is we need a lot of upskilling. India basically is blessed in the fact that it has a very deep pool of young professionals who, by the way, are very easy to train and very quick to learn. And the other good thing that I see in our workforce is the hunger to really excel. So, you know, if you look at our own organization, we created a Center of Excellence 10 years back. And when I stepped in 6 years back, we had only about 2,000 people in them. Today, as of date, I have more than 16,000 people in the same center. And the reason for that is that they have found that if the jobs are also given to these people, they get done just as well. And there is a lot of value add to it. because, we are working in hours when the US is sleeping, and as a result, you're really creating a 24-hour day, okay, with people who are just as good. So to that extent, I think if India is to retain its place as being one of those centers where people send out work to get done, it's a question of ensuring that you are up to date with your skills. And believe me, the skills are evolving at a rate where you feel you are on a Concorde. I don't know, or maybe a rocket. It's evolving on a daily basis. So the biggest thing right now, I think, the worry that we have is how do we ensure that we keep updated, that we ensure that the workforce understands where we are going and how do they get there.
Without a doubt, but we are indeed seeing very large numbers of headcount reduction or layoffs at the biggest multinational companies, right? I mean, tens of thousands of people are getting laid off. In fact, I saw Mark Benioff tweet just this morning saying that it is untrue that we don't need entry-level folks. We're just hiring 1,000 interns and entry-level folks. So we're seeing both of this. We are seeing that AI needs hands and humans to develop it and all of that. But we are also seeing very real disruption. Where will India, which side of the stick will India end up at?
See, no disruption is without pain. To think that, there'll be no pain in our workforce is being naive. But having said that, what happens is when there is a disruption of this nature, newer varieties of jobs get created. Mainly because what AI will do, and especially for a nation as populous as India, it will enable a lot of people to come up to potential, and therefore it will release a lot of demand into the economy. And as demand comes up, economic activity goes up, more jobs get created. Just go back to the time when the automobile first came into being. People were worried what would happen to the stables and the grooms and the coachmen. Now, obviously today, automobiles have created some of the largest work groups that the world has ever seen. So the fact is how exactly and in what sector this work group will come, we do not yet know. But this much I know for certain, that as our standards of living go up, as we are able to lead, better quality lives, the demands that we will make on society will be much more. And not only in the area of IT, where, we are evolving so fast and therefore we are needing people. But even in other areas, we'll begin to create newer kinds of jobs. And more than anything else, I think what's going to happen is, just as a lot of manual labor got taken over in the third industrial revolution, in this industrial revolution, what's going to happen is a lot of repetitive work will all get taken out. Now, autonomous agents are becoming agents on their own right. They're able to do a lot of jobs. But does that mean that we will let them be, that there will be no oversight? That's never going to be the case. So what we will need are people who will be able to provide that oversight. So there will be lots of new roles that are coming up. And the only thing, as I said, is you have to lean into it. You cannot be, leaning out. You have to lean into it, and you have to be with the changes that are coming. And if that is the case, I don't think India has, very much to worry about.
Anish, let me come to you now. As someone who runs a large and diversified conglomerate, including in IT, could you give us a rundown of what are the real challenges your businesses are facing today, especially in terms of raw materials, supply chain constraints, and so on?
The challenges today are essentially to do with supply chain, and what we've seen is, so far, it's good. We don't really see a major issue at this point in time. I agree with Uday that if the war goes on for another 30 days, if it intensifies again, we will likely see a ripple effect from a supply chain standpoint. What worries us most is about helium impacting semiconductors. That will impact multiple industries, not just for India, but across the world. For most other things, we've had the ability to source from various different places. So I would just say it's caused a lot of scrambling for our teams, a lot of effort being put in, but from a net impact standpoint, very minimal. We're not seeing an impact on demand either at this point, so the Indian economy is on a strong footing, and the key for us is to hope that the ceasefire stays as is.
Well, we know you're not seeing any reduction in demand because we see the stories about the months of waiting list for your vehicles. So, on demand front, I think you're fine. Just on a point on IT, this, there is a sense that while Gen AI will disrupt our IT services, a programmer in Bangalore who's equipped with, say, Cloud Code is more effective than than he was before, than he or she was before, and two, than their compatriots elsewhere. Is that an effect that you think we will see play out?
I see huge potential with AI, and I agree with Arundhati that there are going to be many more jobs created. And I see this as an opportunity for India, because India has a talent. And that will allow our industries to be a lot more competitive. And let me just give a few examples here. We are looking at AI in the paint shop to have a better quality of paint, actually use less paint, but have it more uniform and give a customer a better car as a result of that. We're looking at AI in welding. A simple process like welding typically requires destructive testing. Now you can do 100% testing through AI. In a holidays business, we're looking at AI in terms of creating a concierge for folks who come into holiday. In a real estate business, we're looking at that to give a better handover to the customer, because AI cameras can come in and look at every single crack that's on the ceiling or anywhere in the apartment and our ability to fix it. So I can keep going on. In our renewables business, we're looking at AI to have better generation of power from solar panels. And all of these are things that could not have been done before. So while we talk about jobs for AI, we're looking at AI as being deployed in each of our businesses in a much bigger way, and that's actually going to create a lot more jobs as we go forward.
Sajjan, let me come to you now. Both Uday and Anish said the big question is, will the war end in 30 days? What do you think?
I don't think even Donald Trump knows that. So that's, but I have a different perspective to this war. And my point is that, today the world is not the same, what we've seen over the last 30, 40 years. The world has become a very volatile place, and something or the other is happening. And we as a large country cannot depend on, one LPG tanker is coming, the ship has left, and my dinner will be made, cooked, or restaurants will be running because LPG is coming. We can, as a large country like India, we cannot depend on that. So what we need to do is, very quickly, we have to rely on the energy source, especially, of our own. Now, what energy source do we have? We have solar, sun, enough sun, right? We have wind, we have coal, and nuclear. So these are the four real energy sources that we have. So we must, as a country, we must really make ourselves truly Atmanirbhar by using our own energy source. For example, we can go on induction heating for home cooking. We have to popularize that. Rather than Prime Minister standing and giving LPG cylinders and counting whether how many % of Indian population has got LPG cylinder, we have to start doing how many people have got induction heating in their kitchen, and electricity to be supplied to every village, which now more or less is there. So that is like for cooking. Similarly, for mobility, we must depend on electric cars, electric trucks, electric buses, which is definitely possible. We have to come out of our comfort zone, because, every petrol bunk has, we are used to it, go and fill the gas and move on. We have to move to this new way of life, because we cannot, this is an opportunity, this crisis must be taken as an opportunity and must not be left unattended, must not be taken for granted that, okay, 30 days, the war will be over and then we'll be back to normal. We must take it as a challenge. We must make it as a real opportunity to change our way of thinking and working.
Udai, on that, let me come to you. India has historically been bad at reforming, but very good at reforming in the face of a crisis. Does this crisis offer us an opportunity to think of reforms, and what would your prescription be?
I think this is a big opportunity. Having said that, we start from a better place than what we started in the past. So I'll just look at some quick numbers and then come to what we need to look at. We have, give or take, roughly about $550 billion of cash reserves. If I add gold and SDRs, keeping aside net of the shorts, we are at about $600+ billion of reserves. If things go bad, our current account deficit currently is running at about 45 billion a year, give or take 1% of GDP. If we assume oil at close to between $90 and $100, our current account deficit will be about $100 billion a year, which is 2.5% of GDP. And portfolios and foreign investments, March was an extreme month where we saw 14 billion go out in a month. But if I'm being more sort of benign about it, say if we give or take lose of $50 billion a year, that's a total of $150 billion which needs to be financed, and I'm keeping the debt part aside. So with 550 to 600 billion reserves, I don't think India is in as difficult a position as it was in the earlier times. We have built up enough reserves, but there is very little room for complacency because there's a very large amount of equity in India, which is between FPI and FDI put together at about $1.5 trillion. So some of it, if it goes away, it's a lot of money for the country to be able to really absorb that. But reserves are comfortable, but not something which we can take for granted. In terms of what this crisis can do for us, and I take on from what Sajjan said, and I think about the biggest area of crisis really, opportunity is the whole area of renewables. India has done quite well and progressed well on renewables. Therefore, we should reduce our dependence on hydrocarbons. And we've been talking about it for a long time. We have progressed on renewables. We should move at much greater speed. And I know many groups have moved at great speed, and I would request many more groups to really speed up hydrocarbons. The second area is cars and electric. We were in China. 60% of all cars in China are electric cars. In India, the number is 3%. And most projections tell me that even by 2030, India will be only 10%. We have to really turbocharge that. And of course, the issue is raw materials, availability. I don't think we have a choice, but we have to be clear that the two major superpowers in the world are United States on the one side and China on the other. And we have to have good economic relationships with both and find ways of getting a sourcing. We cannot spend automobile combustion through ICE for 97% of our cars. And Indian industry has to wake up, and we should have, in this crisis, an aggressive target. There will be at least 25 to 30% of all new cars, which will be electric cars. And what can we do about that? And stuff like that, take some bold steps. Between now and 2030, we will truly become more Atmanirbhar in a world where assets and control over assets is going to be a critical part of strategy.
So, Sajjan, he spoke about, Uday spoke about your trip to China. 60% of cars, as he said, in China are electric. But in China, the percentage of GDP that goes into R&D is also very, very high. Is that an area, I mean, we know it's an area India is lacking in. What needs to change to improve the situation?
So I think, China, if we talk particularly about China, because China is the new country which is giving a real fight to the US. China's fight is not with India, they are fighting with United States. And they've made a very clear policy that we have to beat United States in whatever way they are doing. So the only way you can beat United States, any country can do well, is to have a massive spend on R&D. And issue is that in R&D, you never know whether you win or you lose, because till the end, you don't know. So China took this very conscious decision that we are going to spend billions and trillions of dollars in R&D. And every province, every state in our language, every state of theirs, they spend huge amount of money on R&D. They identify the industries, the entrepreneurs, and they call them, they talk to them that what do you need? For example, BYD, when way back in 2015, BYD was called by the Shenzhen province chief that we want to beat Tesla. Okay, we need to create something which is ahead of Tesla. So what do you want? What do you need? Tesla has spent $5 billion in R&D. What do you need? So he asked for $15 billion. And he said, I will make Tesla look like a crap. And they got $15 billion to spend by the state. They spent the money, they got equity stake, the state got equity, and then BYD, when BYD got listed, they sold out their stake and they made much more money to support many more industries. So state in China plays a very important role. State as a federal, state as a provincial. So this is what we need to do in India. We need to, because industry per se will do R&D only to the extent short term. But to look at 10, 15, 20 years ahead, industry will find it very tough to invest that money. So we need to have R&D. We have created Anusandhan, in Government of India last budget, they gave a 1 lakh crore budget for Anusandhan. But I went into details that how do I get money from Anusandhan for the R&D? Because I want to make these cells, which goes into making batteries for electric vehicles, electric trucks. But there is so much procedure, so much of issues that there is no way one can get those Anusandhan or the funding for that project. So this is what is really needed.
So much more to talk about, but unfortunately we are out of time. So much more programming coming up this evening. Honorable Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, Mr. Chandrababu Naidu is here, the winner this evening of the Reformer of the Year award. Our esteemed panelist, Sajjan Jindal, is also a big winner this evening of Business Leader of the Year. We'll get into the ceremony shortly, and prior to that, we'll have a conversation with Honorable Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who should also be here with us shortly. So lots of exciting program ahead. Much as I would have loved to talk more and picked your brains more, we'll close now. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause to our panelists, please. Thank you.